We are focusing on the Missouri River corridor during the 1860s, a period where national conflict, explosive economic opportunity, and intense frontier peril converged to fundamentally reshape American commerce and Western settlement.
Welcome to the history section. To approach this decade effectively, we must first establish the Missouri River, not merely as a convenient route, but as a critical and highly complex transportation artery.
A complex artery that ran directly through, really, a geopolitical fault line.
It did. The challenges for steamboat captains were unique because Missouri was a slave state. While it remained, nominally in the Union, the loyalties were deeply divided.
Especially in the towns along the river itself.
Exactly. The populations there were deeply rooted in Southern sympathy. This forced the Union, especially with its logistical demands, to overcome a kind of internal resistance that complicated every single transit right from the start of the war.
And that complexity became tangible almost immediately, didn't it? In the area of just pure maritime skill.
Yes. The research makes it clear that the ideological division extended directly to the highly specialized workforce needed to navigate that waterway.
It's a profound illustration of the loyalty divide.
It is. History tells us that virtually every individual with the essential knowledge to pilot the treacherous Missouri River, all but two of them, sympathized with the Confederacy.
All the two. That's a staggering figure.
It had immediate strategic consequences. In June 1861, when General Nathaniel Lyon needed to move troops and supplies, he simply couldn't rely on the local labor.
He had no one to hire.
He was compelled to seek out and employ pilots from the comparatively calmer Illinois River. It just underscores the immediate and profound disruption the war caused to the local infrastructure.
This ideological split then quickly escalated into something more active, into organized economic warfare.
It did. Confederate forces and their proxies saw any loyal commerce, especially vessels carrying Union goods or supplies for the new Western settlements, as legitimate targets.
Targets for confiscation.
For confiscation and for disruption. This strategy manifested through coordinated guerrilla bands, which presented a constant, terrifying menace.
And the geography of the river played right into their hands.
But perfectly. The high wooded banks of the lower river, we're talking about the section below Kansas City, became infested with these groups.
Ideal for ambush.
Yes, they used these sheltered spots constantly, firing indiscriminately into passing boats. This had a definitive impact. Commercial traffic was effectively driven off the lower river altogether.
So it created a kind of geographical split in the river's economy.
A stark dichotomy. While the flow of goods was strangled in the Missouri heartland, the Union's enormous logistical demands further north, coupled with the burgeoning Montana gold rush, simultaneously stimulated trade upriver.
So the war, which shut down one part of the river, was actually the engine powering the other.
A very risky expansion, but yes.
And this, of course, required rapid adaptation from the steamboat operators. They had to invent and implement strict mitigation measures just to survive.
The old operational protocols were thrown out entirely. For safety, it became absolutely necessary to tie up at night, but always on the north bank.
Away from the south bank, which the guerrillas favored.
Precisely. Or, as captains like the very experienced Joseph La Barge preferred, they would anchor securely right in the middle of the stream.
Putting a barrier of water between them and any potential ambush.
A very effective barrier. It made small arms fire significantly less accurate and would delay any attempt to board the vessel. Beyond these tactics, we also see mechanical innovation.
Right. The pilot houses, they were the most exposed part of the boat.
The most critical control point, and they were frequently retrofitted.
Tell us more about that specific adaptation. It seems it was a solution born from one threat that proved useful against another.
Yes. The solution was the installation of semi-cylindrical shields, thick, curved plates made of boiler iron.
Fitted right around the pilot house.
Correct, providing critical protection for the pilot and the steersman. They were essential against guerrilla gunfire on the lower river. But as trade moved north toward the gold fields, captains quickly realized these same shields offered crucial protection against arrows and musketry from indigenous peoples,
who were becoming increasingly hostile to this commercial invasion of their territory.
It was a multi-threat solution born purely out of necessity. It transformed the riverboat into a kind of armored logistics platform.
And for the high-value government freight, there was an extra layer of security.
At times. For vessels carrying significant government cargo, Union troops were occasionally sent up with a boat.
But only for part of the journey.
That's right. These protection details typically disembarked once the vessel had safely passed Kansas City. That point marked the general limit where the immediate organized guerrilla threat began to dissipate.
To really understand the sheer brutality of this conflict on the river, we have to look at a specific incident: the affair of the Sam Gady in March 1863.
Brigadier General Lone summarized the environment perfectly. He said guerrilla operations were waging a relentless, cruel, and bloody war upon our unarmed and defenseless citizens.
And the Sam Gady incident near Sibley, Missouri is a devastating example of that.
It is. The steamboat was transporting a standard load, but its human cargo really illustrates the convergence of conflicts. On board were wealthy passengers heading for the Montana gold fields.
Signifying that economic draw of the upper river.
Exactly. There were also a number of paroled Union soldiers traveling home, and critically, about 40 people referred to at the time as contrabands.
Formerly enslaved people, freed by the war.
Yes. And as the boat was passing under a high wooded bank, it was ambushed and seized by a notorious group of Hicks's guerrillas.
And the vessel immediately became a scene of chaotic plunder.
The attack was ruthless. Passengers rushed to hide valuables. The paroled Union soldiers, knowing their fate, tried to quickly change into civilian clothes.
But the guerrillas showed no mercy.
None. They initiated a systematic robbery, stripping passengers of everything. We have accounts of one man nearly being executed on the spot for trying to hide his watch in his boot.
And they destroyed any Union property they found.
Threw it into the river, broke open the vessel's safes, and emptied them. But the violence quickly moved beyond simple theft.
This is where it reveals the true terror of the conflict.
Indeed. The political and racial violence was immediate and cold-blooded. The paroled Union soldiers who were identified were taken from the vessel and summarily shot.
And the formerly enslaved individual.
All 40 of them were driven ashore at gunpoint, marched away from the boat, and shot in cold blood.
Horrifying.
The surviving crew and passengers later testified that their shrieks could be distinctly heard on the boat as the massacre took place. After that, the guerrillas permitted the traumatized Sam Gady to proceed downriver.
But what's notable here is the rapid military response. The Union forces were determined to stamp this out.
The response was remarkably quick. Major Ransom's Kansas troops pursued Hicks's band relentlessly and overtook their camp almost immediately.
And the engagement was decisive.
In the ensuing combat, they killed 17 of the guerrillas. Furthermore, they captured their horses and summarily hanged 2 other members of the gang, completely dispersing the organization.
The swiftness and severity of that retaliation were clearly intended as a message.
A very clear message about the price of such atrocities.
This collective experience of conflict brings us to the personal story of Captain Joseph La Barge. His story really encapsulates the impossible choices people faced in a border state like Missouri.
It does. La Barge's allegiance was complicated. He was born and bred in the antebellum atmosphere of Missouri. He was a slave owner himself.
His natural sympathies, as he later wrote, lay with the South.
Given his background, yes. Yet, when forced to make that absolute choice between Union and disunion, he stood firmly for the Union. He took the oath of allegiance and committed his vessels to government service throughout the war.
A decision that required a notable degree of personal conviction.
And self-denial of his natural leanings, frankly. And it immediately placed him in direct confrontation with his former neighbors.
Exposing him to the threat of mob violence, as we see during his trip on the Emily in 1861.
Yes, the Emily had stopped at St. Joseph, a town with strong Southern sympathies. As the boat left, partisans on board publicly cheered for Jefferson Davis.
And news of that traveled fast.
It was telegraphed ahead to Leavenworth, Kansas. There, a fierce Union agitator, Colonel R.D. Anthony, immediately called a public meeting. The citizens, inflamed by the news, decided La Barge must be captured and hanged upon arrival.
He was saved by a friend, the freighter Alexander Majors.
Majors boarded the Emily the moment it touched the Leavenworth bank and urgently warned La Barge not to tie up. La Barge assessed the scene, a hostile crowd waiting with a rope on the levee, and immediately signaled for departure.
He just pulled back into the stream,
outwitting the crowd completely. The frustrated citizens yelled that they would catch him at the next landing. Wyandotte. La Barge simply bypassed that location entirely.
So while he evaded Southern sympathizing mobs, his Union stance didn't protect him from the Confederate military.
No, which led to him being forced into service under duress, a situation which then, ironically, put him in conflict with his own Union superiors.
This happened early in the '61 season.
That's right. The Emily arrived at Boonville, just as Confederate forces were evacuating. Confederate General Marmaduke boarded the vessel, placed La Barge under arrest, and forced him to transport the sick General Sterling Price upriver to Lexington.
La Barge protested, citing his Union contracts.
He did, vehemently. He mentioned his responsibility for paying his crew. Marmaduke promised payment, of course, which never materialized. Not surprising, given the first thing they did in Lexington was sack the local banks.
So La Barge, having been compelled to aid the enemy, made sure to secure his own defense.
He obtained a strong letter from General Price confirming the service was performed under duress. Yet, even with that evidence, he faced serious consequences.
When he returned to Union-controlled waters,
Despite the letter, he ran into immediate trouble. He was fired upon and arrested by Lieutenant White. La Barge later wrote scathingly of White, calling him an insolent and arbitrary clerk who exercised his minor authority with petty severity.
this led to a face-to-face confrontation with General Lyon.
Yes, and Lyon was initially highly skeptical of the letter and La Barge's claim of innocence. He plainly told the captain he was in a very bad scrape.
What saved him?
The timely intervention of Frank Blair, a well-known political figure who vouched for La Barge's character. She was eventually released, but not without further loss.
His provisions were confiscated.
All of them, taken by Lyon's fleet to supply his own forces. The ordeal cost La Barge about $5,000 and created a deep, lasting antagonism toward General Lyon.
The risk of impressment was just a constant occupational hazard then.
It was. It happened to him again the following year. In 1862, at Portland, Missouri, a gang of Confederates concealed behind a woodpile seized the boat and forced him to ferry 175 men and 175 horses across the river. It underscores that even committed Union loyalty was no shield.
Following these disruptions on the lower river, we should shift our focus upriver to the military presence there. This area was secured by a rather unique organization, the United States Volunteers.
The U.S. Volunteers were a fascinating little-known chapter of the war. They consisted of 6 regiments and 1 independent company.
And their composition was what made them unique.
Primarily Confederate deserters and prisoners of war who chose to take the oath of allegiance to the United States. They were immediately deployed far from the primary conflict, serving on the Western Plains.
They became commonly known as the galvanized Yankees.
An evocative term. Their main function was garrisoning new military posts designed to protect upper river traffic and control access to the goldfields.
And this brings us to Colonel Charles A.R. Diamond, commander of the 1st Regiment at Fort Rice in 1864, an officer who became a source of intense controversy.
Diamond quickly earned a notorious reputation, often referred to contemptuously by traders as Demon. The allegations were severe, that he ordered his own men shot on the least provocation, leading many to desert out of fear of his tyrannical and ungovernable temper.
But there's important context there, isn't there?
A crucial counterpoint. While Diamond was certainly stern, the research suggests many of the men who died at Fort Rice actually succumbed to rampant disease, not execution. This directly contradicts the more extreme claims propagated by the traders.
Who had their own reasons to dislike a strict military commander.
They certainly did. The incident that solidified Diamond's reputation occurred in 1865, right after the news of President Lincoln's assassination.
A highly charged confrontation involving powerful commercial interests.
A sensational display of authority. The American Fur Company boat, the Yellowstone, was carrying passengers, including individuals with Southern sympathies and the new owners of the fur trade operation, Hawley and Hubbell.
And when news of the assassination reached them,
The records note that all passengers, including the former Confederates, expressed sincere horror. Yet, upon the boat's arrival at Fort Rice, Colonel Diamond arrested the entire party.
got charged.
An extraordinary one, jubilating over the assassination.
With no evidence to back it up.
None that was ever substantiated. It seems to have been a highly performative demonstration of Diamond's intense unionism and a means of imposing military authority over the powerful traders he distrusted.
And he was particularly severe with C.P. Chateau.
Threatening to take him out and shoot him like a dog. Chateau, recognizing Diamond's known impetuosity, was genuinely terrified.
This heavy-handed action spurred the detained traders to act. Hubbell and Hawley needed to report Diamond's conduct to his superior, General Sully.
Yes, downriver in Sioux City, they secured a yawl and a letter detailing the situation. But Diamond was highly suspicious.
He demanded to inspect their letters before they left.
He did. Hubbell and Hawley displayed remarkable presence of mind. They cleverly concealed the most damning letter intended for General Sully in the breech of a Henry rifle.
A brilliant move.
They were then permitted to go, making an incredibly rapid journey to reach Sully.
And Sully's reaction.
Immediate and decisive. He issued a written order instructing Diamond to release the Yellowstone and its passengers at once. Hobble and Hawley transported this order back upriver, forcing Diamond to comply.
So Sully's intervention eased the crisis, but the friction remained.
It did. And Sully's own assessment of Diamond is quite illuminating.
He saw a man of great military capability but flawed judgment.
Exactly. Writing in June 1865, Sully acknowledged Diamond's energy and pluck, but deemed him too young, too rash for an independent command in indigenous country. He added that Diamond was the sort of man he desired under me in the field.
High praise for his military efficiency, at least.
Yes. And a month later, after inspecting Fort Rice, Sully was impressed, calling Diamond an excellent officer who just needed a few more years of experience to curb his impetuosity.
But the sheer volume of complaints driven by the traders eventually led to an official investigation.
They did. A board of officers investigated his conduct. He was relieved of command in July 1865. Nonetheless, his military prowess was recognized. He was later breveted brigadier general for meritorious service.
The sense we get is that he was just too harsh for the traders, who saw military discipline as an obstacle to profit.
A necessary strictness, perhaps, combined with his own highly strung temperament. That clash generated the massive controversy he caused on the river.
If the Civil War introduced chaos, the gold rush was the absolute catalyst that transformed the scale, wealth, and peril of Missouri commerce. The irony is striking. Western Montana, one of the first mountain areas visited by Europeans, was the last to reveal its wealth.
It's a central paradox of Western expansion. For decades, immigration had established major settlements across the West Utah, the Pacific Coast, Colorado. Yet, Montana remained largely inaccessible, its mineral wealth unknown.
The first claim dates back to 1852.
By a Canadian half-breed named Benitzi on Gold Creek. But the first concrete transaction confirming the value of the gold occurred a few years later.
Around 1856 or 57.
Yes. A man arrived at Fort Benton with gold dust from the Deer Lodge Valley. The noted trader Culbertson took a risk, exchanging $1,000 worth of merchandise for it. When the dust was assayed, it proved to be worth $1,500.
So that's the first officially known exchange.
It is. The knowledge was further solidified by the Stewart brothers, James and Granville, in 1858.
They prospected Gold Creek and found paying prospects?
They did, but they were almost immediately forced to leave the area due to intense harassment from the Blackfeet, who saw the miners as a direct threat. Their reports nonetheless confirmed the presence of pay dirt.
And these earlier findings eventually led to systematic mining, which initiated the massive gold boom.
The Stewarts returned and, in the winter of 1861-62, officially began sluicing operations. Then J.M. Bozeman's party found gold at Pikes Peak Gulch, which was critical because it started diverting immigrants who were originally bound for Idaho back toward Montana.
But the real beginning of the boom happened on Grasshopper Creek.
In 1862, a party found gold there, leading to the immediate establishment of Bannock City. It grew to 500 residents by the end of the year. But the absolute apex of the rush arrived in May 1863 with the discovery of Alder Gulch.
One of the richest strikes in North American history.
An accidental but momentous finding by William Fairweather and Henry Edgar. It turned out to be the single richest placer deposit in gold mining history.
And this discovery created Virginia City almost overnight.
Virginia City became the first territorial capital and boasted 10,000 residents in under 2 years. It utterly transformed the territory.
And Last Chance Gulch followed that pattern, leading to the foundation of Helena.
It did. These colossal strikes redefined the role of the Missouri River. Despite all the challenges, it became the indispensable commercial highway feeding this massive new population.
The river's strategic advantage was unparalleled, wasn't it?
It was the only way to move massive quantities of materials. It offered a route to transport freight up to 500 tons per vessel from St. Louis all the way to Fort Benton without breaking bulk.
And Fort Benton was within 100 to 200 miles of all the major mining centers.
Exactly. This direct connection was absolutely crucial. And the steamboat trade just surged to unbelievable proportions.
The statistics are staggering.
Before 1864, only 6 steamboats had ever reached Fort Benton. In 1866 and 1867, there were 70 arrivals. 1867 was the high water mark, with over 12,000 tons of freight carried upriver past Sioux City in that single year.
This must have created a surreal visual scene.
An astonishing convergence of worlds. Records describe 30 or 40 steamboats operating at once between Fort Benton and the Yellowstone's mouth. These noble craft, filled with refined passengers and the necessaries of civilization, set against a backdrop of absolute primeval wilderness. It was described as marvelous and wholly inexplicable by those who saw it.
And this commercial explosion was fundamentally driven by the economics of high risk and even higher reward.
The profits from a successful voyage were fabulous. The W.J. Lewis reported a profit of $40,000, the Peter Balin $65,000, and Captain La Barge's Octavia cleared over $40,000 on a single trip.
And the high costs reflected that risk.
Freight rates from St. Louis to Fort Benton were exceptionally high, reaching 12 cents per pound. Cabin fare for a passenger was $300.
And the compensation for the crew reflects the danger, too.
Especially for the pilot. A master might get $200 a month, but the best pilots could command up to $1,200 a month. It shows how indispensable that talent for navigating the treacherous currents really was.
So upstream traffic was massive tonnage, but downstream was mostly the wealth generated by the mines.
Downstream cargo was minimal in bulk, but incredibly valuable. The Luella in 1866 carried $1.25 million worth of raw gold dust.
But for the miners returning outside the brief boating season, the journey was intensely perilous.
They relied on Mackinaw boats, cheap, wooden flatboats. But these craft offered virtually no protection against hostile indigenous peoples along the river.
So the river corridor became a site of continuous conflict.
One of the most violent episodes, directly rooted in settler aggression, was the Marias River Massacre in 1865.
It started with a drunken party of trappers seeking revenge for stolen horses.
Yes, and they came upon a camp of 3 blood indigenous men near Fort Benton who were entirely unconnected to the theft. The trappers attacked and killed all 3, an act of unprovoked violence,
which sparked immediate and fierce retaliation.
A large band of blood warriors, already exasperated by the encroachment, encountered a party from the steamboat cutter near the mouth of the Marias River.
And they ambushed them.
10 armed Europeans left the boat to collect timber. They were ambushed in a narrow defile. The attack was flawlessly executed. Every man was killed.
Another defining tragedy, one that highlights the link between government corruption and frontier violence, was the Tobacco Garden Massacre in July 1863.
An event where Captain La Barge played a central role. He was chartering the Robert Campbell, loaded with $70,000 in annuities for various indigenous peoples. They were forced to endure a disastrous 42-day delay in St. Louis, waiting for the annuities.
A delay which pushed the voyage into the low water period,
making it difficult, hazardous, and dangerously late. And the late arrival immediately created a crisis when they reached Fort Pierre,
where the Sioux bands had assembled.
They were already hostile but waiting for the goods. The agent, Samuel Lotta, delivered only about 2/3 of what was promised, claiming the rest hadn't arrived.
A blatant withholding of treaty goods that sparked deep anger.
And this kind of corruption was shamefully common. So the angered Two Kettles band then undertook an astonishing pursuit of the 2 steamboats.
They followed them for 600 miles.
All the way from Fort Pierre to Fort Union, attacking the boats whenever they stopped for wood. The climax occurred at Tobacco Garden.
And how did the captains become aware of the threat waiting for them?
Their hunter, Louis Dauphin, swam across the river to warn La Barge that an estimated 1,500 Sioux warriors were gathered there to capture the boat.
So the boats anchored and the Sioux demanded the balance of their annuities.
Agent Lotta refused, but suggested sending the yawl to bring the chiefs aboard for a parley. The indigenous leaders, however, wanted the agent himself to come ashore.
And this is where Agent Lotta's cowardice becomes manifest.
He suddenly claimed to be ill and refused to go. Instead, he urged the captain to send the unarmed crew. La Barge refused to order anyone, but a crew of 7 men volunteered.
A brave but fateful decision.
As the yawl neared the bank, the steersman, Andy Stinger, realized the indigenous people were armed. With incredible presence of mind, he instantly threw himself into the water and dragged the yawl back into the stream.
His rapid action saved most of the crew.
But not all. 2 oarsmen were killed by spears, a 3rd by a gun, and a 4th was wounded by an arrow before Stinger could get the vessel out of range.
And the steamboats responded with force.
Both boats were equipped with howitzers and firearms. They immediately opened fire, killing 18 indigenous men and 20 horses. Stinger was later widely recognized as the hero of the Tobacco Garden.
And La Barge's condemnation of the government agent was profound.
He strongly believed Agent Lotta was corrupt and in collusion with the American Fur Company to sell the retained annuities for private gain. He blamed the Department of Indian Affairs directly for the violence.
Beyond these large-scale confrontations, smaller incidents reinforced the pervasive peril.
The dangers were constant. In 1865, the steamer St. John's was attacked, and the mate was instantly killed. The General Grant lost 3 men who were pounced upon while securing a line.
And the violence wasn't always external.
No. In 1866, on a Mackinac boat, a miner named Thompson suddenly killed one companion with an axe and wounded another. The rest fled, believing it was an indigenous attack. It shows how the stress of the frontier could lead to internal breakdown.
Despite the risks, people continued to make these journeys, often carrying immense wealth.
Absolutely. That same year, a party of 17 men successfully transported over $200,000 in gold dust in just 22 days.
And they developed more sophisticated ways to handle the danger.
J.B. Hubbell's ingenious transport in 1866 is a fascinating example. He built an elaborate 80-foot Mackinac with bulletproof walls. It carried 30 passengers safely from Fort Benton to Sioux City.
And finally, there's an incredible anecdote from 1867 that illustrates sheer human endurance.
In July 1867, the steamer Trover was wrecked. During the salvage, 2 young colored boys were accidentally left behind. One drowned. The other, Frederick Good, faced certain starvation.
But he survived.
He undertook an unbelievable physical feat. He walked 642 miles in just 9 days on virtually no food, surviving on bark and flower blossoms before he was rescued. An incredible story of resilience.
Let's shift back to the commercial ventures, specifically La Barge, Harkness and Company, established in 61-62 to pursue the gold trade.
The firm was established with a capital of $50,000. The La Barges handled the steamboats, Jacquard the finances, Galpin the lower river trade, and crucially, James Harkness was mandated to go to the mines for 2 years to develop that trade.
And the river operations started with remarkable success.
The Emily's first voyage was a tremendous success. Captain La Barge completed the 2,300-mile round trip in less than 32 days, setting a new high standard for upper river speed.
This speed put them in direct aggressive competition with the American Fur Company.
A very serious threat. During one journey, the Emily overtook their boat, the Spread Eagle. As the Emily attempted to pass, the Spread Eagle's pilot, a man named Bailey, did something shocking.
He deliberately steered his boat into the Emily.
Plunged its bow right into the side, opposite her boilers, in a clear attempt to cause a catastrophic wreck.
An act of maritime sabotage.
Absolutely. La Barge threatened to shoot him if he didn't back off, and the passengers quickly retrieved their own firearms. The combined threats were effective, and the Spread Eagle retreated.
But what's remarkable is La Barge's reaction afterward.
Bailey's pilot license was canceled. He later appealed to La Barge, admitting the company had instigated the sabotage and begged for reinstatement for the sake of his large family.
And La Barge helped him.
He did. He personally intervened with the inspector and had Bailey's license reinstated. A surprising level of compassion in the midst of fierce rivalry.
So while the maritime operations succeeded, the land-based part of the venture, entrusted to Harkness, was a catastrophic failure.
Harkness was the linchpin. He was supposed to develop the profitable trade with the mining camps. They established a post, Fort La Barge, near Fort Benton.
But his trade expedition to the mines was a disaster.
Rooted in his lack of commitment, he set out in July 1862 for the Deer Lodge Valley mines. His journal from the journey is quite revealing.
Full of complaints and an excessive focus on trout fishing.
His journal notes he frequently nooned at 11 a.m. to catch trout. He spent only 11 days in the crucial mining region before becoming completely disgusted with the work.
And he abandoned his 2-year mandate.
He left his valuable merchandise with someone else to be sold on commission. La Barge later wrote with indignation that the company never received a cent for those goods. Harkness returned to St. Louis, having completely failed, showing he lacked the courage and hardihood for the frontier.
One man's decision to prioritize fishing over fortune undermined the entire enterprise.
The history of the Missouri River corridor in the 1860s represents one of the most intense and violent convergences of conflict and nascent capitalism in the history of American expansion. The National Civil War did not simply disrupt commerce, it fundamentally segmented it, choking traffic below Kansas City while simultaneously creating the logistical need and economic vacuum that allowed gold discoveries to fuel a perilous, high-risk expansion further north. The steamboat was transformed during this period from a simple vehicle of trade into a unique, armored, mobile frontier outpost, connecting a deeply divided nation to a new, vital source of wealth, all while navigating the constant and deadly perils posed by the environment, outlaws, and the fierce indigenous resistance stemming from territorial encroachment and broken government promises. We're looking today at the Upper Missouri River Corridor, specifically during the 1860s. It's a period that really represents a A unique confluence of challenges.
You have logistical nightmares, for one.
Exactly. And intense commercial rivalries, monopolies, really. And on top of all that, you had this profound failure in the relationship between the government and the indigenous peoples of the region.
And our material for this really centers on one figure in particular, doesn't it?
It does. We're focusing heavily on the operations and the many misfortunes of Captain Joseph La Barge. His story provides an incredibly granular case study.
A window into the kind of immense pressure that was being exerted on these carriers, the people who were quite literally the supply line for the entire frontier during this very turbulent decade.
And the context here is just so extreme. You're navigating the almost unimaginable difficulty of river travel, often under wartime conditions.
And dealing with the complexity of government contracts.
Especially the delivery of indigenous annuities, which was always politically charged. It's a story about the difficulty of the river, the corruption of the system, and ultimately the severe personal cost of trying to do business and perhaps trying to do it honestly in that environment.
So let's start with the immediate crisis of 1863. It seems like a simple delay at first glance, but it spirals into something much bigger.
It really does. It becomes a financial and legal track that in many ways defined the rest of Captain La Barge's career.
It all begins with a steamboat, the Robert Campbell.
Yes, and the experience of the Robert Campbell in '63 is just a profound lesson in the sheer unpredictability of the Missouri River.
Steamboat schedules were, I assume, based on the spring rise in the water level.
They were predicated on it, yes. But even then, nature frequently just defeated commerce. The Campbell's voyage upstream, heading toward Fort Benton, was abruptly terminated.
Where'd it get stuck?
At a place called the Yellowstone Bar. And the obstacle was purely physical. The water depth over that bar measured a scant 2 feet.
2 feet. That's nothing for a boat of that size.
It's an impossibility. For a commercial steamer, there was no way forward. The vessel arrived there on July 8th, which is a critical date.
Because there's no more water coming.
Exactly. No further rise could be expected. In fact, that year was so bad, such a severe drought, that no commercial boat successfully reached Fort Benton for the rest of the 1863 season.
And this failure to move forward immediately becomes a government crisis.
Immediately. Because the cargo that's now stranded includes a massive volume of annuities.
These are the federally contracted goods, the payments for land rights secured through treaties.
The goods the U.S. government was obligated to provide to various tribes. In this case, the Crows, the Assiniboines, and the Blackfeet. Non-delivery is a direct breach of contract by the government.
Even though the fault here lies with the river.
The government doesn't care. Now, fortunately, some of the recipients were close enough. The Assiniboines were able to come down to the stalled boats and receive their specific annuities.
But not everyone.
No. The goods for the Blackfeet were a huge problem. They were intended for delivery hundreds of miles further upstream at Fort Benton. They were just hopelessly stranded.
Which creates a serious dilemma for Captain La Barge.
A terrible dilemma. The Blackfeet agent, a Dr. Reed, advises him to store the goods at Fort Union until the following spring.
Were there any other options?
Realistically, no. Hauling that massive volume of cargo by wagon to Fort Benton was completely unfeasible. You just couldn't secure that kind of land transportation in such a remote area.
So why was La Barge so reluctant to just store it? It seems like the only choice.
Because of where he had to store it. Fort Union was, for all intents and purposes, controlled by his principal rival,
The American Fur Company.
the monopoly. Storing the cargo there meant placing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of federal goods, not to mention his own financial security, into the physical control of the company that was actively trying to destroy his business.
But he had no choice.
He had no choice. Necessity forced his hand. The transfer took 5 laborious days, consigning all those goods to the American Fur Company warehouse.
He must have been nervous about that.
Terribly. So to protect himself, he made sure the transfer was scrupulously documented. It was supervised by an agent, William Hotchkiss, and critically witnessed by a Captain W.B. Greer of the U.S. Army.
An official witness.
Yes, and Greer signed the full receipts for all the stored cargo. This extensive documentation, it really reflects the toxic climate of mistrust at the time.
This is during the Civil War, so I imagine Washington was on high alert for fraud.
Exactly. There was widespread suspicion that the government was being defrauded by contractors across the board. So adjusting any claim, even a legitimate one like La Barge's, was incredibly difficult. Authorities just assumed dishonesty from the start.
So the paperwork was his only defense.
Agent Reed understood this perfectly. He provided La Barge with a detailed written statement outlining everything: the low water, the physical impossibility of proceeding, the lack of alternatives, all to justify placing federal cargo in the hands of the competition.
Okay, so the cargo is stored and he starts heading back downriver. But the trouble for 1863 isn't over.
Not by a long shot. The journey downriver immediately presented a whole new set of complications. La Barge went from being a commercial carrier to a military logistical asset very suddenly.
How did that happen?
Shortly after dealing with the storage at Fort Union, his boats, including a lighter vessel called the Shreveport, encountered General Sully. This was near Crow Creek, about 82 miles below Pierre.
And Sully was on a campaign.
A large expedition against the hostile Sioux, and he simply exercised his right of military authority and impressed the Shreveport into immediate government service.
Just like that.
Just like that. And this had a severe personal toll. La Barge's brother, who was also a captain, refused to stay on the impressed boat. This forced Captain La Barge himself to stay and take command.
And what about the crew?
They deserted. Facing the dangers of a military campaign, they wanted no part of it. It actually required General Sully's military authority to secure a replacement crew for the vessel's new duties.
So what was he tasked with doing?
He began hauling military supplies, traveling as far north as the mouth of the Little Cheyenne, supporting Sully's forces. He then had to wait for the campaign to conclude.
How long did this service last?
It continued through the autumn. He was directed to Fort Leavenworth, then did a late-season cargo trip to Sioux City, and didn't return to St. Louis until late November.
That's a long season.
Over 6 months of continuous military service. The research describes it as one of the most physically and mentally demanding seasons ever experienced on the river. The captain was averaging scarcely 5 hours of sleep a night, just constant responsibility.
It really shows the strain on these individuals who were the backbone of the Union's logistical effort in the West.
It truly does.
Yeah.
And then 1864 brings the financial and contractual reckoning for the whole 1863 debacle.
He has to go to Washington.
He travels to Washington to see the Indian commissioner, and the result is infuriating. He receives full payment only for the goods he actually delivered.
What about the annuities stranded at Fort Union?
He gets absolutely nothing for them, nor is he compensated for the significant financial losses he incurred because the Indian Department had delayed giving him the goods to start his journey on time in the first place.
So he's penalized for the government's own delay and inactive nature.
Precisely. But, ironically, despite this refusal to compensate him, he was still trusted enough to secure a new contract for the 1864 shipping season.
So he heads back upriver in 1864 with his new steamer, the Effie Deans.
And he's fully expecting to retrieve those 1863 annuities from Fort Union for final delivery.
But upon arrival, he gets a warning.
An immediate and devastating warning. He encounters Captain Greer, the same U.S. Army officer who had witnessed the storage receipt the year before.
And what does Greer tell him?
Greer immediately warns him that the American Fur Company had, quote, traded it nearly all for robes.
The federal property.
The federal property, intended for Native American compensation, had been co-opted for the private commercial gain of the monopoly. It was gone.
So what happens when he confronts the agent in charge?
The new agent, a man named Rolette, the previous agent, Gulches, had died. He immediately tries to block La Barge. His first move is just transparent extortion.
He demands a storage fee.
An exorbitant one, $2,000. But when La Barge actually offers to pay it, Rolette instantly changes tactics.
What does he demand then?
He refuses delivery of any remaining cargo unless La Barge surrenders the original 1863 receipts.
Which is La Barge's only proof he stored them in the first place.
Exactly. It's his only defense against the government later charging him for non-delivery. So La Barge wisely refuses. He offers a receipt only for whatever physical cargo is actually handed over to him.
So Rolette is cornered.
He is.
Yeah.
And he makes an open admission of misappropriation. He states plainly he cannot deliver all the goods.
What's his excuse?
He claims he'd already distributed a large portion to the Grosventers and other indigenous peoples based on a supposed verbal order from Commissioner Dole in Washington.
A verbal order. That sounds suspicious.
It was immediately exposed as fraudulent. He couldn't produce any receipts from the indigenous recipients, which was an invariable mandatory rule. And of course, he couldn't produce the alleged verbal order.
So it was just a lie.
An unqualified theft. La Barge, with Captain Greer again present as a witness, concluded the vast majority of the goods had been used in the American Fur Company's trade. He refused to surrender his receipts, and since Rolette wouldn't release the goods without them, La Barge had to continue upriver empty-handed.
What was the financial damage from that one incident?
A direct, uncompensated loss to Captain La Barge of nearly $20,000, a massive sum for the time, which he never recouped.
And the research notes this contributed to him dying a poor man.
Yes, still legally owed money by the government from these unpaid claims. The real tragedy, though, is how the bureaucracy protected the theft.
He took the matter further up the chain, didn't he?
She did. He went to Washington, accused the department officials of allowing the wrongful disposal of the Blackfoot annuities. And the response was just a bureaucratic brick wall.
They produced their own paperwork.
A department official produced fraudulent counter receipts, signed by chiefs and, critically, witnessed by American Fur Company agents, the perpetrators themselves.
And the official's defense.
It was conclusive and chilling.
Hmm.
He said, "There are the receipts. We cannot go back of them. They have been considered final evidence in such cases since the foundation of the government."
The system was designed to protect itself.
The fraudulent paperwork generated by the thieves guaranteed their impunity.
So this logistical crisis and the annuity fraud are devastating, but they were happening at the same time as internal failures within his own company?
Yes, it was a perfect storm. The annuity fraud was compounded by failures and litigation that sealed the fate of his business, La Barge, Harkness & Co.
This goes back to the Shreveport, before it was impressed by the Army.
That's right. Before Sully took it, the Shreveport failed to get above a place called Cow Island, again because of low water. Its cargo, which included freight for outside parties, was discharged right there on the bank.
By his brother and his partner, Harkness.
And this action immediately highlighted the significant incapacity of the partner, Harkness. The firm had a contract to deliver that freight all the way to Fort Benton.
But Harkness just left it there.
He failed entirely to arrange for immediate land transportation. Now, to be fair, the situation was dangerous. Fort Union was under siege that summer, so there was a real threat from hostile indigenous peoples.
But abandoning the cargo was still a critical error.
A fatal one, as it turned out, because that logistical breakdown quickly escalated into devastating legal action, specifically the Nicholas Wall litigation.
And who was Nicholas Wall?
He was a partner of a John J. Roe, and he was one of the outside parties whose freight was stranded at Cow Island. But the background of his relationship with La Barge is what makes this so treacherous.
La Barge had helped him in the past.
Extraordinarily so. Wall was a known Confederate sympathizer, captured in 1861. La Barge personally acted as his bondsman, securing his freedom and giving him a job.
That's a significant gesture of trust.
And it didn't stop there. In 1862, La Barge gave Wall free transportation to Fort Benton on the steamer Emily and advanced him $700 cash to get to the mines. He essentially set Wall up for success.
So when Wall's cargo is abandoned, how does he react?
He doesn't seek mediation. He doesn't discuss the logistical reality. He immediately organizes his own wagon train to get his freight. And then, the spring of 1864, he and his partner Roe present La Barge with a staggering claim.
For how much?
$40,000 in damages, for goods that were estimated to be worth only $10,000 in St. Louis.
A fourfold exaggeration.
At least. La Barge, seeing the legal danger, tried to settle. He offered to pay Wall the full $10,000 price of the goods and waive all the freight charges. A very reasonable offer.
Which was refused.
Summarily refused. Roe, Wall's partner, openly declared he would sue in Montana, not St. Louis, because he believed, correctly, that a frontier jury would be prejudiced against an outside shipping company and award a massive judgment.
So while this legal threat is building, the company's frontier operations are also falling apart.
Completely disintegrating. Their outpost, Fort La Barge, was suffering from poor management. Then a man named Robert H. Lemon took over, and he proved to be an even greater liability.
What did he do?
Without any authorization from the partners, Lemon took the extraordinary and ruinous step of turning the firm's entire property over to the American Fur Company.
He just gave it all away to the competition.
On August 31st, 1863. This was a catastrophic, unilateral transfer. It included all their assets, even the freight still stranded at Cow Island.
So he single-handedly crushed his own company.
Effectively, yes. This unauthorized action eliminated the primary competition to the monopoly almost at its inception. It shows how the American Fur Company didn't always have to rely on government fraud. Internal sabotage and commercial pressure worked just as well.
And what was the outcome of the lawsuit?
The trial was held in Montana in 1865. The defense was badly managed. La Barge and Harkness weren't even there. Just as Roe predicted, the verdict was against them. $24,000.
Which they had to pay.
In full. The total financial consequences were ruinous. Beyond the judgment, all the firm's property in Montana was lost. including valuable furs that had been ruined by poor storage. The cumulative loss was fully $100,000.
A fortune at the time.
It seriously impaired Captain La Barge's personal fortune. The firm did dissolve honorably, paying every single liability, which preserved his reputation but depleted his wealth.
And the research is clear. While the American Fur Company was actively hostile, the primary cause of the collapse was internal.
Yes, the reckless management of Harkness and the unauthorized actions of Lemon.
And there's a final irony here with the man who sued them, John J. Roe.
A huge irony. Roe used the very oxen acquired from La Barge, Harkness & Co., the oxen they were originally meant to move that stranded freight as the nucleus for his own land transportation business.
What did it become?
The Diamond R Company. It grew to enormous proportions, employing 1,200 oxen and 400 mules at its peak. So the failure of one rival provided the essential logistical foundation for the rise of the next great freight empire in the West.
Despite these incredible financial setbacks in 1863, La Barge's career continues. He's clearly resilient.
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
His career continues, marked by high-stakes commerce and a constant navigation of frontier dangers. To stabilize his position, he first reorganizes his assets.
This is when he sells the Shreveport.
Yes, in the winter of 1863-64, he makes an unexpected but advantageous sale to Henry Ames & Co. for $25,000. And the transaction itself is notable.
How so?
Because of the level of personal trust involved. Ames accepted La Barge's word alone that the boat was entirely debt-free. He bypassed all the customary legal documentation. It's a testament to La Barge's impeccable reputation among his peers.
And he immediately reinvests the money.
Immediately. He buys the new steamer F.E. Deans for $40,000, retaining a 3/4 interest himself.
And the F.E. Deans sets out in 1864, but again, the river has other plans.
Yes, yet again, the unpredictable Missouri defeated the schedule. The vessel only reached the Marias River before critically low water forced the discharge of the cargo.
But this time, he doesn't abandon it.
No. He demonstrates his relentless commitment. He stays in the upper country himself, has the boat sent back downriver, and then he personally supervises hiring wagons to transport everything overland to Fort Benton and the mining centers around Virginia City.
After all that business is done, he faces a new threat. Not the river, but the people on the frontier.
The criminal element, yes. He was tasked with transporting a substantial amount of wealth, almost $100,000 in gold dust back east, and he knew that fact was widely known.
Which made him a target for outlaws, the road agents.
The prime target. The danger was so extreme he had to wait for over 2 months for a safe opportunity to leave Montana.
How did he finally manage it?
Through a very clever bit of strategic deception, he deliberately let a rumor spread that he would be departing on a specific, publicly known stagecoach.
But he don't take it.
Instead, he stole away several days earlier, traveling incognito, avoiding the main routes where the road agents would be waiting.
And was this precaution necessary?
It was absolutely necessary. The stagecoach he was scheduled to take was, in fact, held up by road agents, and a passenger named Hughes was killed during the robbery.
His deception saved his life.
And his fortune. It starkly illustrates the lethal reality of moving wealth on the frontier.
His journey then takes him to Salt Lake City, where he faces a different kind of challenge.
The prohibitive cost of commercial transportation. Ben Holliday, who ran the overland stage, wanted $1,800 for a single coach to Nebraska City.
An exorbitant price.
And Wells Fargo Express wanted $2,500 to ship the gold dust via San Francisco. And, critically, they refused to assume any responsibility for its safety.
So he rejects those options.
He does. He chose instead to buy his own team and wagon and undertake the journey home himself with a few companions, carrying the gold dust in thick buckskin bags. Absolute self-reliance.
And while he was in Salt Lake City, he met with Brigham Young.
Yes, he called on Brigham Young several times and was apparently received very hospitably. Young gave him tours of the tabernacle and the theater.
He also reconnected with old friends who had converted to Mormonism.
He did, and they made several focused attempts to recruit him, men like Hooper and Hopkins. But their appeal was framed explicitly as a simple business proposition.
Not a religious one.
Not at all. It was about the practical commercial advantage of joining their powerful community network.
So he continues his journey home, still carrying the gold dust, and the danger isn't over.
Far from it. In the valley of the South Platte, they meet an old frontiersman named Geary, who gives them a critical warning.
What does he tell them?
He advises them to immediately hide on an island in the Platte River. He'd received intelligence that hostile indigenous peoples were scouring the country. They heeded his advice.
And once again, the warning proved accurate.
Lethally accurate.
Hmm.
Shortly after resuming their journey, they found the site of a massacre that had occurred only a day or two before.
The next year, 1865, brings another crisis, this one involving his brother.
A near-ruinous disaster, averted only by La Barge's exceptional capacity. His brother, John La Barge, was captain of the Cape Kearney, carrying a huge, valuable cargo for their business partner, John S. McCune.
And what did his brother do?
Citing the extreme hostility of indigenous peoples near Fort Union, he prematurely abandoned the trip, stranding the entire valuable cargo.
And the lawsuit started immediately.
Yes, news traveled fast. Opportunistic lawsuits against the cargo owner, McCune, quickly totaled some $300,000, a sum that would have financially destroyed him.
So McCune sends for Captain La Barge.
An urgent message via the overland route finds La Barge in Helena. He immediately sets out for Fort Benton, acting on a professional assumption.
Which was?
He correctly believed that his experienced pilot on the Effie Deans, Captain Ray, wouldn't have just left the freight. And he was right. Ray had found the stranded Cape Kearney, transferred the entire cargo to his own boat, and made it as far as Fort Galpin before he, too, was stranded by low water.
So the cargo was safe, but still stuck.
And the lawsuits were still pending. So La Barge took swift executive action. He procured 30 ox teams, each with 5 yoke, and wagons, a monumental logistical feat on the frontier.
And he got the freight delivered.
He took personal possession of it and ensured its safe delivery. That single rapid intervention saved McCune from catastrophic loss. All $300,000 in lawsuits were immediately withdrawn.
It's clear that to understand all this conflict and fraud, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture of U.S. policy towards indigenous peoples.
We absolutely do. The recurring patterns of annuity fraud, commercial monopolization, and intermittent conflict can't be understood without examining the systemic policy failures of the era.
The Missouri Valley was home to a vast number of tribes.
Many different indigenous peoples, the Missouris, Osages, Kansas, Omahas, Pawnees, the vast Sioux Nation. Further north, the Mandans, Minnetarees, Assiniboines, and the powerful Blackfeet complex.
And their entire way of life was dictated by the river's geography.
It was. Unlike the indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes, the Missouri tribes were generally poor navigators. The river was too treacherous, and the local timber, mostly cottonwood, was unsuitable for large watercraft.
So they gravitated to the river not for transport, but for survival.
For 2 life-sustaining necessities: a never-failing source of drinking water, and the only significant timbered regions for shelter and fuel.
In the initial period of contact with Europeans, the era of the trader was relatively harmonious.
It was, because the European trader sought no permanent settlement. They weren't trying to change the indigenous mode of life. They were partners in the fur trade. Their economic interests aligned.
But that all ended with the arrival of the emigrant, the permanent settler.
Abruptly. And the rapid influx of thousands of Europeans led directly to the destruction of the primary resource of the Plains tribes, the buffalo.
The numbers are staggering.
Conservative estimates suggest as many as 400,000 buffalo were slain in 1853 alone. The extermination of the buffalo meant one of 2 things for the Plains tribes: starvation or absolute dependence on the government.
Which put the government in an impossible position.
The research deems it a problem beyond human wisdom to solve. How do you legally deprive the Native Americans of their birthright, their land, and their livelihood without acknowledging you're committing a fundamental wrong?
The research frames it as a decree of destiny.
The European population would displace the indigenous population. The massive predetermined loss was the fundamental wrong. All the policies that followed were just flawed attempts to manage an unjust transition.
And this leads to the treaty system.
A deeply flawed system. The government tried to deal with the tribes based on a premise of political equality, as if they were sovereign nations, when in reality that equality of power didn't exist.
So it was a policy of insincerity.
Yes. It just deferred the inevitable conflict by making solemn promises the government knew, or should have known, it couldn't keep. It fostered a false notion of sovereignty.
The Laramie Treaty of 1851 is the first major example.
It was. It aimed to end intertribal wars and secure rights of way for immigrant routes. In exchange, it promised annual goods annuities totaling $50,000 for 15 years.
But the annuity system created by these treaties was itself deeply vulnerable to fraud.
Inherently vulnerable. The indigenous recipients were completely excluded from the process. They couldn't select the goods, award the contracts, or verify the quality or quantity of what they received.
And during the Civil War, inflation made things even worse.
It did. Currency depreciation meant the fixed value of the annuities bought less and less, a loss the recipients couldn't possibly understand or effectively protest.
And accountability was, it seems, systematically undermined.
Completely. Agents lacked their own facilities, so they were forced to use the warehouses of traders, primarily the American Fur Company. Annuity goods got mixed with the trader's own stock.
Which led to indigenous peoples having to trade valuable furs for goods that were legally theirs for free.
A scandalous situation. And accountability was further minimized because the only proof of delivery required was the signature of the chiefs, often witnessed by the very American Fur Company agents who benefited from the fraud.
What percentage of the promised goods actually made it to the tribes?
The research suggests that from 1850 to 1870, it was likely less than half. The rest was lost to fraud, depreciation, or outright commercial theft.
And the Indian agency system itself was compromised.
Fatally compromised by the spoils system. Political appointees with no experience were sent out to these lucrative posts. Even honest agents were often powerless because the system itself was inherently vicious.
There was an experiment to appoint clergymen, wasn't there?
Yes, but it largely failed. Lacking experience, these men often became, quote, pliant tools in the hands of the shrewd trader. The issue wasn't just individual morality, it was the institutional structure that incentivized and protected systemic theft.
This breakdown in policy and the failure to deliver annuities predictably led to military conflict.
It was inevitable. A key early incident was the Grattan Massacre in 1854 near Fort Laramie.
What happened there?
A Lieutenant Grattan and about 20 men tried to forcibly arrest an indigenous man accused of killing a stray cow. He grossly miscalculated the situation, and the entire military party was massacred by superior Sioux forces.
And what was the immediate aftermath?
The Sioux broke into the American Fur Company warehouse and seized the annuities that were waiting for them. Goods they saw as their rightful, if delayed, compensation.
This prompted a military response.
General Harney was sent in 1855. He attacked a large force near Ash Hollow, routing them, and then established Fort Randall in 1856. This brought a period of comparative peace, but the underlying grievances just continued to build.
Until the major eruption in 1862.
The Minnesota Massacre, led by Sioux Chief Little Crow. 1,000 people killed, massive property destruction. This immediately prompted General Pope to organize two large expeditions.
Sibley and Sully.
Yes, with Sully moving up the Missouri to cut off the hostile Sioux retreat. This is the 1863 campaign that required the impressment of La Barge's Shreveport.
And Sully's campaigns were largely successful in establishing a military presence deeper in the territory.
They were. He won a significant victory at Whitestone Hill and established Fort Sully. In 1864, he built Fort Rice and led the first military wagon train across the Badlands of North Dakota.
He defeated indigenous forces at Killdeer Mountain.
He did, but his plan to build a new post on the Yellowstone was thwarted by a logistical failure. A supply steamer carrying materials for the post was wrecked. Still, the campaign permanently advanced the military frontier.
And throughout all of this, the steamboat was essential military infrastructure.
Absolutely essential. By the Sioux War of 63-64, the government was entirely dependent on steamboats for transporting men, supplies, and communications.
There's the example of the forced relocation of the Winnebago people.
A striking example. To move them from Minnesota to the Missouri River, they were transported 1,900 miles by water, rather than 300 miles overland. It shows that the river was seen as the dominant, safest, and most reliable route.
Every fort on the river depended on them.
Exclusively. From Randall to Benton, they all depended on riverboats for food, ordnance, and reinforcement.
This dependency is on full display during the climactic 1876 campaign against the non-treaty Sioux.
It is. General Sheridan planned a massive concentric movement, but it was based on a disastrous underestimation of the indigenous force.
A fleet of steamboats supported General Terry's command, but one vessel in particular, the Far West, became famous.
Captained by Grant Marsh, it achieved lasting historic distinction. It served as Terry's headquarters and was absolutely critical after the Custer Massacre.
It performed a rescue and reporting mission.
A crucial one. It navigated up the Bighorn River to the Little Bighorn, took on the wounded survivors from Reno's command, and then undertook a high-speed race against time back to Fort Abraham Lincoln.
Arriving on July 5th.
About midnight, carrying both the wounded soldiers and the dispatches that delivered the shocking news of the Custer tragedy to the nation.
And Captain La Barge also played a role in that campaign.
A direct, though less dramatic, role. His light draft boat, the John M. Chambers, carried supplies, and later General Terry himself. After the indigenous forces had crossed the Missouri, La Barge ferried Reno's command across in pursuit.
The indispensable nature of the steamboat is shown again in the Nez Perce campaign of 1877.
Perhaps most dramatically of all, Chief Joseph was leading his people on a desperate flight toward the British line, skillfully evading U.S. troops.
And General Miles knew he had to intercept them quickly.
Speed was everything. His scouts reached the Missouri River just in time to stop the last boat of the season from going downriver. Minutes later, and it would have been gone.
That's an incredible piece of timing.
The success of the entire operation hinged on it. Miles loaded his rations, then got intelligence. The Nez Perce had already crossed upstream. He had to fire cannons to get the boat to come back after it had stopped for wood,
And the boat ferried his command across.
giving him the crucial tactical advantage of speed. He overtook and defeated Chief Joseph at Snake Creek, less than 50 miles from the Canadian border.
The research is clear on this point.
It emphasizes that but for the timely aid of that single steamboat, the entire band likely would have escaped.
La Barge's prominence as a carrier gave him access to some of the highest levels of power in Washington. He met Abraham Lincoln.
He did on his first visit in 1862. He was part of a delegation that presented President Lincoln with a valuable beaver fur robe.
And what was Lincoln's reaction?
He greeted La Barge cordially, remembered him from a previous interaction, and upon receiving the robe, he folded it around himself and, quote, danced about for an instant in indigenous fashion.
A rare moment of levity during the war.
A very human moment. But a year later, La Barge used that access to discuss a much more serious issue: the pervasive corruption in indigenous affairs.
He spoke to Lincoln directly about the fraud.
He did. He charged that the annuities passed through the hands of, quote, some of the worst rascals on the face of the earth who are deliberately cheating the indigenous peoples.
And Lincoln's response was quite candid.
Remarkably so. He admitted that the pressures of the Civil War forced him to accept importunate place seekers of worthless character as Indian agents, often at the behest of congressmen just trying to get rid of them.
Did he promise to fix it?
He promised La Barge that once the rebellion was handled, he would commit to addressing the issue and ensuring justice was done in the Indian Department.
La Barge's later interactions with the administration were more adversarial, particularly with the Treasury Secretary, Chase.
Yes, in 1864-65, Chase initially held up La Barge's payment, viewing all Missourians as prima facie rebels, despite La Barge's faithful service to the Union.
So La Barge went over his head.
He went directly to Lincoln, who was amused by Chase's suspicion, and immediately provided an autograph card that secured immediate payment.
La Barge suspected his rivals were working against him in Washington.
He strongly suspected the American Fur Company was trying to smear his reputation to cripple him financially.
And it was during this final visit he confronted the department about the stolen Blackfoot annuities.
The ones that were traded for robes at Fort Union. Lincoln had an official hear the accusation, and the official simply produced the fraudulent receipts. His defense was purely procedural.
We cannot go back of the receipts.
Yes, they were final evidence in such cases since the foundation of the government. It crystallized how the bureaucracy was weaponized to protect systemic theft.
Beyond Lincoln, La Barge knew other major figures, like General Grant.
He was well acquainted with him from the Mexican War onward. He noted that Grant, even as head of all Union armies, spoke to a simple steamboat pilot in an equal and friendly way, which was a refreshing contrast.
And his opinion of General Fremont was less favorable.
Much less. He shared the common St. Louis opinion that Fremont was an overrated man whose success came more from his fortunate marriage to Senator Benton's daughter than his own merit.
But the historical analysis is a bit more nuanced.
It has to be. While he may have been unsuited for high command, Fremont's true niche was as an exceptional explorer. He was pivotal in mapping the West.
And he knew Fremont's father-in-law, Senator Thomas H. Benton, intimately?
Yes, from childhood. Benton was a frequent passenger on his boats. La Barge greatly admired Benton's profound faith in the future of the West.
Benton prophesied the railroads.
He did, across the Pacific and up the Missouri. He once pointed west and declared, "That is the East," believing the true route to the Orient lay in that direction.
But La Barge also saw Benton's negative role.
He noted that Benton consistently used his immense political power to shield the American Fur Company from the consequences of their illegal and fraudulent actions. It shows the deep political connections that allowed the monopoly to operate with near impunity.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.